Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate presentation at the Grad Island Summer Fair. For this particular session, Sinéad English, founder of Hilt Careers, is going to talk to you about CV advice, job hunting, and networking, practical steps to securing that interview. So I'm sure you're all aware of the question and poll features by now, but just in case this is your first talk of the day, you can ask questions using the chat feature to the right of the screen, and you can upvote questions if one you wanted to ask has already been typed in. And at the end of the presentation, I'll put as many of these questions to Sinead as possible. There's also a poll as well, which you'll see to the right of the chat function, so you can have your say by voting on that poll. So without any further ado, I will pass you on to Sinead.
Great. Thanks, Piers, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on how to write a great CV and how to get a job. So, 20 minutes to cover quite a few different topics. So as Piers said, my name is Sinead English, founder of Hilt. We're a career consulting firm. You'll find us at wearehilt.com. I've also got some links there to our social media channels. I'm author of a book which was published in 2019 called CV and Interview 101. I'm going to give you an opportunity to win a copy of that at the end, but it's essentially 101 tips and pieces of advice on writing your CV and how to do a great interview. So the first thing to say is when Grad Ireland asked me to talk about CVs, I thought, CVs, talking about CVs is boring. It is very hard to make it sound engaging. Nobody really likes writing a CV or rewriting a CV and re-looking at the CV. But here's just some statistics just to maybe make you think, okay, well, maybe I do need to pay a bit more attention. There's approximately nowadays about 100 applicants for every job. And about 80% of CVs in the research that we did writing the book, about 80% of CVs have either a typo, a grammatical error, or are low impact. So you just look at them and you kind of go, no, I don't really think so. And it takes an employer, if they are looking at it, and if it's not a robot that's actually reviewing the CV, and more of that later, but it takes an employer on average about 15 seconds to decide if they like the CV or not. So 15 seconds to decide if they're going to read on and give you a fair shot to see whether or not they're going to call you for interview. So yes, writing CVs is boring, and talking about CVs may be boring also, but it is a necessary evil in order to get you into the room and to get you an interview. So I'm just going to do some quick yes or no's. So I understand we don't have, when you're there, but I can't see you, if you know what I mean. So you're just going to have to do yes or no in your head, and then let's see how many of these you get right. So the first one is, should you attach a photo of yourself to the CV? So should you put a photo of yourself on the CV? Yes or no? 2 seconds to think about it. The answer to that is no. You should not put a photo of yourself on the CV. I've seen quite a lot of CVs now that there's obviously a particular template going around where there's a left-hand column and there's a photograph of the candidate on there. You shouldn't really put a photo of yourself on there. That's not going to get you called for an interview. You can put a link to your URL site, which has a photo of yourself on there, which I know seems slightly contradictory, but the CV shouldn't have a photo on there. Should you include your age or your date of birth? Yes or no? Age or date of birth? The answer is no, definitely not. We spend a lot of time training interviewers on how not to make decisions based on age discrimination or gender discrimination or racial discrimination. So putting your age or your date of birth is definitely a no-no. If you've got it on your CV, I would take it off. Should you list all of your college modules since you started? So maybe if you're in fourth year, you've got 4 years of modules. That's quite a lot of modules. Should you put them all on the CV, or should you maybe be more selective? Answer: you should not put them all on your CV, because your CV, the first page, is going to look just like basically an index of modules. And if they've only had 15 seconds, you've kind of lost them already by just listing all the CVs. So be selective. And I'll give you an example in a while of how you can portray those on your CV. Should you include your nationality? Yes or no? This is one. We write hundreds of CVs every year for candidates, and we review CVs. This is one that a lot of people make a mistake over. No, you should not put your nationality on your CV. If you you can put on the fact on your CV the fact that you don't need a work visa or work permit to work in the EU citizen, or you don't need a visa, or you have a particular type of visa, but you shouldn't include your nationality on the CV. Hopefully this is generating some questions. People might be going, well, why is that the case? Should you include your postal address? Yes or no? This is actually a cheat. This is an it depends answer. So we should have a line in the middle with the neither a thumbs up nor a thumbs down. So the thing about a postal address is that it could be a reason for people to discriminate against you in a positive or in a negative way. maybe you're living in an area that's very far away from the job you're applying for. And people say, oh, look, they're living in this city and this job is in, 120 miles away. So I really don't think they're going to be a good candidate for the role, and they'll have to move here. And the interviewer, the person reviewing your CV, has basically decided that you're not going to get the job from looking at your CV and just from where you live. Equally, there could be some bias about if you're living in an area that people think is undesirable or maybe too desirable. So it can work both ways. You don't need to put your postal address on. Nobody really sends letters, invitation to interview letters in the post anymore. So just make sure you have your email address and your phone number, and that's going to be enough. Should you include details of 2 completed projects? So the answer to that is yes. So because I'm assuming that for most of you listening today, you're third level students, maybe you've just finished, or maybe you're still halfway through your degree. There may be a number of you who've come back to college after a number of years, but it's important that if you don't have relevant work experience, that you can supplement your CV by putting on examples of projects you've worked on that almost look like work experience. So you could give short details, maybe 2 or 3 lines on 2 projects that you worked on, which will give the employer an idea of the type of work you've done in college, and that could almost be semi-work experience, depending on what degree you've done. Should you use several different fonts to make it look interesting? No. The answer to that is no. You don't want your CV to look like a bit of a dog's dinner with lots of different fonts going on. So have one font and stick to it. Should it be a maximum of 2 pages? Yes or no? The answer to that is a definite yes. We've seen some CVs that are 1 page, which is fine. It's more of a resume style. And we've also seen CVs from recent graduates who are the CVs run to 5 or 6 pages. Too long. Nobody's going to read it. We work with candidates who have maybe 30 years work experience, and they can fit their CV onto 2 pages. So the onus is on you to get it onto 2 pages. And, if you're thinking, well, you know what, I've got a lot to say, so I'll reduce the font size down to a tiny little font, just so, because they're going to be looking at it on a screen, they can expand it anyway. Is it a case that font size doesn't matter because they're going to be looking at it on a screen? The answer to that is no. Font size does matter. So a minimum of size 11, so Times Roman 11 or Arial 11 or Verdana 11. Don't go any smaller than that because you will start to lose them. And they're going to find it hard to read. So they're the key things, just in terms of the basics of a CV, that you need to get right in order for you to get past that 15 to 20 second glance test and move you on to the next stage. So let's talk about the different CV sections. So on our website, wearehilt.com, there is a blog post that we did a while ago called Anatomy of a CV. So if you search back, you will find that. And that is gives you a sample CV and it's annotated to give you advice on all the different sections. But I'm going to give you a short summary of that here. So the first thing is that we know it's a curriculum vitae. So you don't need to write curriculum vitae across the top of your curriculum vitae because we know it's a curriculum vitae. So put your name across the top. Your contact details should be your email, phone, LinkedIn URL if you have one, and if you've got a complete LinkedIn profile. Don't be putting your LinkedIn URL on there if it's only half finished. And then you're going to have a short summary. We're going to come back to that in a minute. And then you'll have different section headings. So you'll have a section for your education, then you'll have one for your work experience. If you're working in an area, or you're looking to work in an area that's got a very specific set of technical skills, IT skills, maybe science, engineering, technology, we have to know, you have to have knowledge of certain applications and software and methodologies. You could have a section on IT skills or technical skills and just list them one underneath the other. For others, that's not going to be a relevant section, but at the very minimum, you should have an education section, a work experience section. Interests and achievements. Sometimes we would see on student CVs that they'd call them hobbies. We would recommend not calling them hobbies because, nobody really wants to know what you like to do in your spare time, but they like to know how well you achieve things with the areas that you're interested in. And then referees, again, would be a section that, we would encourage all students and recently graduated students to have 2 referees, one from your academic life and one from your work experience if possible. So this summary that you put at the top of the CV. So imagine now, visualize that you've got your name across the top, then you've got your contact details, don't need your address, saves you a bit of space. And then straight underneath that, you're going to have a bullet point summary, 3 bullet points that describe you. So you can also be a profile, but you don't need to give it a title. I mean, 3 bullet points at the top of a document is clearly a summary. So you don't need to say summary because that's just wasted another line. If this was the only part of the CV that they would read, so if this was the only part that they were going to read before they decided whether they're going to read the rest of it, the first bullet point should summarize your education. The second one, your work experience, or maybe any relevant project experience. And the third one can summarize any of your key technical skills or soft skills. So I've got 2 summaries that I'm going to put up here. And you can see, take a look at A there. Looks fine, excellent team player, used to working under pressure, hardworking, punctual, and honest. And then you've got B, same student, just described in a different way. The first bullet point describes what degree they're doing, where they're studying. The second one gives some specific example of their work experience. And then the third one gives a soft skill, so communication skills, a transferable skill, and it says where they have learned those skills. So if you were an employer, which would you be more likely to interview, A or B? It's the same person. And if I could see all the chat, I would hope that most of you would be saying B, because A is complete waffle. It's just blah, blah, blah. I have seen hundreds of these on CVs. So they mean nothing. It's like, it could be anybody. It could be every single person who's listening on this call today. You could describe yourself this way, and I would be none the wiser as to who was who. But this one, I want to read more. I'm more interested in this particular candidate. So if you have a summary at the top of your CV, and I would strongly encourage you to do it, make sure that it's more like B than like A. You want them to keep reading. So your education, you're going to start with your current education and work backwards. So take a look at your CV. And if the last time you really had a good look at your CV was when you were in TY and you needed for those work experience stints that you had to do, now is the time to maybe start again, because adding onto a TY CV just looks like you added onto a TY CV. So start with your education, your current degree, what year you're at. This particular person is going to be finishing in 2022. And that's what I mean by not putting in all the modules. So 2021 modules include X, Y, and Z. 19 modules included. So you're just giving them a sense of what the key modules that you are covering. Mirror the job requirements. So if, for example, you're applying for a job and they say that you need to have knowledge of Stata and Sage and MATLAB, for instance, different software packages. If you have covered those in your modules, introduction to Stata, introduction to MATLAB, make sure that those modules go on the CV, because the keywords then will be picked up by the robots and by the people who are reviewing the CV. On your work experience section, I'm conscious I'm going through this very quickly, but hopefully you can listen and take notes at the same time. On the work experience section, it's not just good enough to tell them what you did, but you also tell them how well you did it. So this idea that you should be telling them, but also selling yourself into the role. So again, let me do an A and B for you. Here's an example of, oops, giving the game away there. Here's an example of the same person, the same job described 2 different ways. Administrative assistant. So if you look at the one on the left there, A, you go, yeah, answer the phone, scan filing, clients' files, organize travel schedules. That's good. That's what they do in the job. But it doesn't tell me how well they did it. And if your CV, if you're working in a shop or a pub or a restaurant and it says, took the orders, got the food, delivered it to the customers, worked the till, cashed up each evening, I know that that's what you would be doing in the job, but it doesn't tell me how well you did it. So in the first example here in A, they're just telling me, but in B, they're telling me, and they're also selling themselves into the role. That's the difference between the 2. So take a look at the way you've described your work experience, and we go into this in a lot more detail in the book, how you can take a fairly regular job, maybe you're applying for now a job in finance, but all of your work experience is in retail or in the services sector, and you're thinking, how can I turn that into something that looks more financy? You can do it by focusing on the key skills that you had and how well you did them. There's a big difference between describing it this way and that way. So you should be more like B and not like A. And then the final section, or the penultimate section on the CV, before you would put in about your referees would be your interest and achievement section. So don't call it hobbies. Again, you know, this is sort of a throwback from when you were in school. You might be thinking, oh God, what else can I put on the CV? I have no work experience. So you have a big long list of things you like to do in your spare time. But this is, be more strategic about it. It's an opportunity for you to showcase your skills. So anything you've done, any awards, scholarships, gold medals, first in the class for whatever, all of that stuff goes on in terms of academic achievements. Then you could also have sporting, extracurricular, volunteering activities you're involved in, if you're a class rep, all of these positions of authority that are voluntary. Any charity work you've been involved in, raising money for charity, anything like that can go on here, because it does give the employer a better kind of overall view of you and what they're getting when they employ you. So it can just maybe make the difference between choosing you versus anybody else. So here's a sample laid out. Here's Sid's sample, very creative of us. His phone number, his email address, here's his bullet point summary, and then he starts off with his education, following very much the format that I described earlier. And as I said, you'll find more examples on wearehilt.com, sample CVs. Just 2 words on the applicant tracking system before I go on to talk about how to get a job. We only have about 5 minutes for that. A lot of you will have heard of, oh, humans don't look at your CVs anymore at all. It's all robots, which is true to some extent. And I know that a lot of the colleges now are making available to students software whereby you can put your CV through a tracker essentially, and you can say, okay, here's my CV and here's the type of job I'm going for, and it will give you a match score. It will say, based on this CV, your CV is an 85% match to the job, or it could be a 10% match to the job, and it will tell you how to improve it. You don't have enough keywords in there. You know, your sections aren't clear enough. You're using too many buzzwords. So all of that stuff will be really helpful. But for, generally speaking, for when you're trying to beat the applicant tracking systems, avoid lots of tables and boxes and columns. Avoid putting in photographs on the CV or graphs, because an applicant tracking system is used to reading words, not photos or images, and it sometimes can't make sense of those. So what you might think is really great information may just be coming up as a blank screen for an applicant tracking system. Again, put in as many keywords as you can, because it is about matching yourself to the job. So that's enough about CVs. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Now let's talk about where all the jobs are. So it's a well-known fact that 70% of jobs don't get advertised at all. So within that 30%, for those of you mathematicians in the room, where are you hearing about the 30%? This is what we're used to. It's right in front of us all the time. Adverts, agencies, Grad Ireland fairs, websites, job boards, the career service, LinkedIn ads. So it's all publicly available. It's right there in front of you. You can see it, and so can everybody else. The competition is huge, and the likelihood of success is very low, just because there are so many people applying for the same type jobs. So then if you take a look at the other side of this pie, we have the so-called hidden job market. So how can you access these jobs? 70% of them are in this category. So surely it's worth your while trying to come up with a plan to see, okay, well, I'll keep an eye on all the advertised stuff here, the 30%, but I do need to somehow find a way to get my way into the so-called hidden job market. So how are you going to find these jobs? It's from networking. You will know this. It's contacts, it's referrals, it's telling people what you want to do. So people are not mind readers. I cannot look at a room full of people and look at everybody and go, okay, I think you want to work here and I think you are really interested in this career. People don't know. You need to tell them. You need to be planting the seed. But how do you do that? How do you network in a way that doesn't feel cringy or scary or just a little bit, transactional, that you're just using people for information? So there's a process or a system that I'm going to just explain to you over the next couple of minutes. Still got a couple of minutes, whereby you can put together a networking action plan to start to access the 70% of jobs that don't get advertised at all. So you are not going to be divinely inspired just the fact that there's a job going in a company when it never gets advertised. People within the company need to be telling you about it. How can they tell you about it if they don't know you're interested in it? So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. So you need to be planting a seed and telling people in companies and in industries that you're interested in that particular company or industry. So put a plan in place for people that you can ask, and to ask them questions about what it's like to work in the industry, what kind of people do they hire, what kind of qualifications do they have, They have, and this process is called informational interviews. So here would be some of the people, or the types of people that in our experience, students and candidates who are looking for jobs have had very, high level of success in approaching people like these and asking them a couple of questions about what it is they do. So the alumni from your college, your university, your Institute of Technology, that would be number one, because there's such goodwill. I mean, think of it, if you're finished your degree and you're working in your ideal job and everything's great, and you get approached by somebody who's maybe in their second or third year of college, in your university or in your college, and they say, hi, look, I see that you're now working in X, you did the same course as me, would I be able to ask you just a couple of questions about what it's like to work in that industry? 95% of the time, people who are asked that in the right way from somebody that they know or know of, they're going to go, yeah, sure, what do you want to know? So what you've done there is you get the information from the person about what it's like to work in the industry, what the opportunities are like, what kind of people they hire, maybe what that particular person's route into the company was. You get all that info, but the other thing you get is you get profile in front of that person, and you chose that person to connect with and to ask them a few questions because they were working in the industry. So they will now go back to their desk and, 5 days or 2 months later, when they hear of an opportunity in the 70% of jobs that never get advertised, that it's all word of mouth, they will think of you. But they're not going to think of you if you haven't planted that seed via a meeting, an informational interview. So alumni, ex-work colleagues, people you used to work with, placements, if you've done a placement as part of your course, really valuable connections there that you can leverage. Your career service, friends, family, neighbours, clubs and societies, volunteering. Huge amount of people that you could potentially ask. So what am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to find 3 people from that list and come up with 3 questions to ask each one. So 3 by 3. So 3 people from the list, we had alumni, work colleagues, placement. I mean, there's lots of different points that you can turn to and say, okay, who do I know? Who do I know that I could ask a couple of questions to? And on our website, wearehilt.com, we've got a lot of resources on informational interviews, which is what this process is. And just in the interest of time, because I knew this wasn't going to be a long session, we've put them, they're all on the website. And if you just search by informational interview, you will find these 3 that we put up here. Questions to ask an informational interview, how to get started in an informational interview, and how to activate your network, given that 70% of jobs are found through networking. So 3 people and 3 questions to ask each one. And the types of questions you're asking are, how did you get started in the industry? What's it like to work here? What's the best thing about your job? What's the worst thing? What advice would you give somebody trying to break into the industry? I have done a degree in X. Have you hired people with that particular degree in the past? What kind of people have you been hiring? I mean, there's lots and lots of questions on those blog posts so that you can find ones. We're only looking for 3 per person. Find 3 that are going to be relevant to the person you're interviewing. So you ask them the questions, they give you the answers, you get much better information, and then you would find that you are now moving in this 70% of the pie chart, that area where the jobs don't get advertised, but it's word of mouth, and you've had a conversation with somebody not so long ago. They're going to think of you when there's an opportunity, and will approach you and ask you, would you be interested? So people say, oh, I was in the right place at the right time, I just got really lucky. It's not luck. You make your own luck by planning these informational interviews. Don't worry about the phrase interview. Sometimes people feel, oh my gosh, it's a job interview. It's not. You don't have the information. That's why you are asking the questions. You're not supposed to have the information, but people will really respect you for using this process to find a job, because it's much better and much more proactive than just following, responding to all the ads and applying things. And, the success rate of applying through jobs boards is about 5%. That's the success rate of just getting to the next round, getting to an interview, not getting the job. So you're applying, sending your CV off. And if any of you are sitting there nodding, going, yep, that's me. I've sent out 50 CVs in the last 2 months and I haven't heard anything back. Try this approach. What have you got to lose? Nothing. The worst thing that can happen is you ask to meet somebody and they say no. So, that's not so bad. You get over it. There's plenty more people you can ask. You're going to tell them, I only want to ask you 3 questions. So again, you're not asking for a huge amount of their time. We know countless people who have done really well getting themselves into that hidden job market by using this technique. So of course, keep your eye on the ads and the advertised stuff, but also put together a project plan for accessing the 70% of the jobs that don't get advertised at all, which is networking. So competition, just before we take any questions, we've recently launched our Instagram page, thanks to our wonderful interns. Hi, Sam and Ellen. And we're looking to grow our platform. So after this session, we're going to be opening up a competition to win a free copy of our book. And all you have to do is follow Hilt Careers on Instagram, like our latest post, tag 3 friends, and share it on your story. So follow, like, tag 3 friends, share it on your story, and we will announce the winner on our stories on Monday to give you plenty of opportunity to do it. So CV and Interview 101, it's got really, really strong reviews. People find it really useful for helping them to get a job. You can also buy it on our website if you don't want to wait to see if you win the competition. So that is everything that I had planned to say. I'm conscious I've gone slightly over time, but it's a lot to cover in 24 minutes. So back to you guys to see if anybody has any questions.
That's great, Sinead. Really, really good. Some, good practical advice people can implement right away. So I'm sure everyone appreciated that. Yeah, we're time for 2 or 3 questions. I'll just fire some quick ones at you. I think you covered this, in the top, but just to reiterate it again, because it is something that came up on an earlier session as well, which is people seem, surprised with the fact that you don't include a photo on the CV. I know you talked about, look, it can be, discriminated against one way or the other. But can you just reiterate that fact again as, why not? But some people do think it's a good idea, but it's a big, big no-no.
Well, it's how you look should not affect somebody's opinion of your ability to do the job. So whether you're at one end of the looks scale or the other, that's not going to make any difference to your ability to do the job unless you're applying for a job as, I don't know, a model or something, in which case, that's key part of the job, that you look well. So putting a photograph on there, the standard in Ireland and the UK would be not to do that. So when you put a photo on there, you're kind of going against best practice. Now, it's regional. So for instance, if you were applying for a job in Germany, you would be expected to put a photo on there. So, you should check depending on what country you're applying for. And I know it does sound a bit ridiculous because, if you put your LinkedIn URL on, they can click on that and they can see your photo, because you should always have your photograph on your LinkedIn profile. But best practice would be not to have a photograph on there. Okay. They're not expecting it. So don't put it on there. And it's wastes a little bit of space when you could be saying something better about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes the quality of photos aren't good anyway. You see a blob in the corner which has been photocopied 5 times, and you're going, is that a person or is it just like an ink stain?
Yeah, I was just about to say, because you might put the photo on because it's small, it sometimes affects formatting. It doesn't look so good. You might not be able to see the person properly anyway, and it can be a bit of a hassle to upload it. So it's one of those things just to leave. Another question here is just about, someone said, if you've had a lot of jobs, whether part-time, full-time, of course, maybe through college or if you're later on in your career, are you better off listing off all of the jobs you've done or just 1 or 2 in detail?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So say let's paint a scenario of somebody who has done 6 jobs working in pubs and restaurants over the last 3 years, for a few months here and a few months there. And if you were to list them all, it could take up a page. And then you're trying to think of something interesting to say about each one. But because it was kind of the same job anyway in 6 different places, we've seen some CVs where they literally just copy and paste the same description 6 times, which is really bad and really lazy and shows zero imagination. So what we would recommend you do there is, the dates are important. It's important that they can follow how long you were there in each job for. So you would have on the CV on the left-hand side, the date. So maybe, June 2017 to March 2018, server XYZ restaurant Limerick. Okay, and then straight underneath you might have June 2000 or September 2018 to March 2019, server ABC restaurant Clare. It's kind of the same job, and then you work down through all of the different jobs and the dates, and then you give one description of all of them. because it's kind of the same thing. So they get the dates, they see the dates that you were working in each of the places for, and you have one description then.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And also, obviously, it depends on the relevance of the job to the, your previous roles to the job you're applying for as well.
Exactly. But, I mean, and any job can be, we would say any job is a good job. And we hear a lot from students, oh, I've only worked in the Centra and I've only worked in a local pub and now I'm applying for a job for an accountancy firm. So in a Centra or in the local pub, you have customers, you've got customer service, you've got working under pressure, you've got attention to detail, you have all of those skills that you're going to need to transfer into your so-called real job. So don't undersell yourself in describing what you do. If you describe that you worked in a Centra by packing the shelves and serving at the till, then yeah, you're kind of wasting an opportunity to say something good about yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really, really good advice. Transferable skills, you get them in all different types of jobs, whether it's doing mental arithmetic really quickly, if you're working at till, like as you said, the big one is customer service, that is, a lot of jobs, great jobs. You are dealing with people and having those people skills, you build them up, by dealing with people on a regular basis. If you're dealing with hundreds of people daily in a part-time job in a Pennies or a Centre or a pub, restaurants, wherever it may be, that's something people want to know about.
Much harder.
Yeah, much harder. Oh, believe I know.